My family's version of me was decided sometime around 1994. The problem is, I never agreed to it. And at 35, I stopped performing the character they cast me as. I want to tell you something I only understood last spring. Something that took me 27 years to see clearly, and another 6 months to say out loud. My name is Marin. And for most of my life, I was the difficult one, the sensitive one, the dramatic one, the daughter who made things hard. That was the story. Everyone in my family knew the story. My mother told it like a weather report, calm, factual, slightly tired. Marin was always a little much, even as a child. Beat the thing about a story like that, when it's told about you, around you, over you, for 30 years, is that you stop being able to tell whether it's a description of you or a script you're reading from. You think you're just being yourself, but you're not. You're playing the part. You're hitting the marks. You're saying the lines they wrote for you when you were 8 years old and didn't have a vote. I didn't know that until I was 35. I want you to picture something. It's a Tuesday morning in March, 6 a.m. I'm standing in my kitchen in Briar Hollow, Pennsylvania, holding a coffee cup. My hands are perfectly still. And that's the part I want you to notice. Because for as long as I can remember, every Tuesdays at 6 a.m., my mother used to call. And for as long as I can remember, my hands shook before I picked up, not because she yelled. She never yelled. My mother is too elegant for that. She just had a way of speaking that made me feel like I was being graded. Beat, and every Tuesday at 6 a.m. I failed the test. But on this Tuesday, my hands are still, and I have not yet decided whether I'm going to answer the phone. That's where the story starts. But that's not where it began. Long pause. To understand what happened, you have to understand the family I grew up in, not the way I'm about to describe it now. The way I would have described it 3 years ago, when I was still inside the story. 3 years ago, I would have told you, my family is close. My mother is a strong woman. My father is quiet but kind. My brother and I are different, but we love each other. There's some tension, sure, but every family has tension. I'm a sensitive person. I take things too personally. I'm working on it. Every word of that was true, and every word of that was a lie. Beat because the frame was wrong. The frame was, the problem is me. And I had been agreeing with the frame for so long, I had forgotten there was anything outside of it. I want to tell you about my mother. Her name is Glenda. She is the kind of woman other women describe as put together. Hair always brushed, lipstick a soft mauve, the kind of woman who hosts the holiday dinners and people say Glenda's table with a certain reverence. She volunteered at our church. She brought casseroles to neighbors who lost people. She remembered everyone's birthday. From the outside, and I cannot stress this enough, from the outside, my mother is the woman every neighbor wishes their mother had been. That is the public Glenda. The private Glenda is harder to describe, not because she was cruel. I want to be very careful about that word. She wasn't cruel. She was editorial. She edited reality. She edited conversations while they were happening. She edited memories afterward. She edited me. And I didn't know that's what was happening because nobody told me you were allowed to notice. My father, Doyle, is a man who has spent 43 years married to my mother by getting very good at not finishing his sentences. Your mother just was his most common phrase. He'd say it, and then he'd trail off, and then he'd find a reason to leave the room. I thought that was love for a long time. I now think it was survival. And then there's my brother Brennan, 2 years older than me. Good son, easy child. The narrative around Brennan was that he was uncomplicated, which is family speak, for he didn't notice things. And he didn't. Or maybe he did and he chose not to. I'm still working that one out. So that was us, a close family, a loving family, a normal family, with one small problem, beat me. Here is what I just wanted. I just wanted my mother to look at me the way she looked at Brennan. That's it. That's all this was ever about. From age 8 to age 35, that was the only thing I was reaching for. I'm not someone who needs to be the favorite. I just wanted to not be the project. I just want to walk into a room and not feel her scanning me for the thing that was wrong this time. I wanted to be the kind of daughter she described to her friends without lowering her voice. I'm telling you this so you understand the size of what I'm about to say. Because everything that happened, every shrinking, every apology, every Tuesday morning, every coffee cup my hand shook around, it all came from one quiet need. To be seen as okay. By her. Beat. Just okay. Not extraordinary. Just okay. And she could not let me have that. Long pause, I want to tell you about a rug. There was a white rug in our living room when I was 8. My mother loved that rug. Wool, soft, the kind of rug that cost more than my parents wanted to admit out loud. And one afternoon, a Thursday, late October, I remember because the leaves outside the window were rust-colored. I spilled grape juice on it, a full glass, purple red spreading like ink. Beat that rug stain became a family story. Remember when Marin ruined the rug? It got told at Thanksgivings, at graduations. At my engagement party, my mother told it to my fiancé with a soft laugh and a hand on his arm, like she was warning him. just so you know what you're marrying. The story was that I had thrown the glass. That I had been having a tantrum about something. They could never remember what, and that I had hurled the juice at the rug deliberately. That's the version, that's the family canon. Marin, age 8, having one of her episodes. Except that's not what happened. And the reason I know that's not what happened is that I remember exactly what I was doing in the living room that afternoon. I was sitting on the couch, holding a glass of grape juice and looking out the front window. And I had just seen something through that window I did not understand. And when I tried to tell my mother what I had seen, she walked over fast, too fast, and knocked the glass out of my hand. Long pause, and then she screamed, not at the rug, at me. I'm going to come back to what I saw through that window. I have to. Because what I saw through that window is the whole story. But I didn't understand what I saw until I was 35 years old. And I'm telling this in order, the way I learned it, because that's the only way it makes sense. For now, all you need to know is, the grape juice was not a tantrum. It was a witness. And my mother needed a story other than witness, so she invented tantrum, and the family wrote it down. And for 27 years, every time someone in my family wanted to remind me what I was, they reminded me of the rug. Beat, the rug I never threw the glass at. I think I should also tell you about the cassette tape. In the same kitchen drawer where my mother kept rubber bands and pizza coupons and a single dead battery, she, for some reason, refused to throw away. There was a blue cassette tape. It had a yellowed paper label on it. The label said only M, just the letter, in my mother's handwriting. When I was a child, I asked her once what was on it. She said, nothing, sweetheart. It's broken. The tape's all tangled inside. When I was a teenager, I asked her again. She said, I don't even remember, Marin. It's just old. When I was 25 and helping her clean the drawer, I picked it up and she took it out of my hand, smoothly, mid-sentence, like she didn't know she was doing it, and she put it back in the drawer, and she changed the subject so cleanly that I didn't notice for a full hour that she'd done it. Pause. That cassette tape sat in that drawer for 30 years, through 3 kitchen remodels, through a house move, through every spring cleaning my mother ever performed, nothing on it, broken, old, beat, but she kept it. You don't keep a broken thing for 30 years and move it from house to house unless it isn't broken. Pause, I want you to remember this tape. It's coming back. So that's the setup, a close family, a good mother, a quiet father, an easy brother, and me, the difficult one, the dramatic one, the girl who threw grape juice and made things hard. This is the part where most stories would tell you about the big betrayal, the wedding gone wrong, the inheritance stolen, the text message screenshot. I don't have one of those for you. Beat, what I have is something quieter, and I think it's worse, because what was done to me wasn't an event. It was a climate. It was the weather of my entire childhood. And the worst part, the part I'm still angry about, if I'm being honest, is that I helped make the weather, but I helped. Let me explain. By the time I was 15, I knew the role. Difficult. I'd been playing it since I was 8. And here's what nobody tells you about playing a role for that long. You start to think the costume is your skin. So when my friends thought I was overreacting to something, I'd think, yeah, that's me. I overreact. My mom's right. When a boyfriend told me I was a lot, I'd think, yeah, I am a lot. I've always been a lot. When a college roommate said I was intense, I'd nod and feel a small dark pleasure because the role was at least mine. It was at least something. And this is the part I am most ashamed of. By the time I was in my late 20s, I had started performing difficult, hard, on purpose. Sometimes, when I was tired or hurt or felt invisible, I would lean into the script the family had written for me because at least when I was being difficult, I was being something they saw. Beat. Better to be the problem than to be furniture. There was a cousin's birthday party. I was 28. I don't want to walk you all the way through it. The short version is, I had a glass of wine and my mother said something small and edited and cutting, the way she does, and I stood up at the table and I shouted at her. In front of 40 people, in front of my fiancé, in front of her sister, I shouted, "Why do you hate me?" And the room went silent. Voice cracks, and my mother, God, this is the part. My mother put her hand to her chest, and she looked around the table, and she said in this small, wounded voice, "See, this is what I deal with." I left the party. I cried in the parking lot. I apologized for 2 weeks. I sent flowers. I sent a card. And every single person in my family, when they talked about that party afterward, talked about Marin's outburst. Not one of them asked what she had said to me. Long pause. I want you to hold that, because that night was the lowest point, and it was also, though I didn't know it yet, the night my mother realized I was getting close to something. And from that night on, the editing got more aggressive. The story about me got told more often, louder to more people. You know how Marin is. She was rebuilding the cage, because the cage was starting to rattle. I want to tell you about Dr. Ashley Oren. I started therapy at 32, late, I know. I'd resisted it for years, because And I'm just going to be honest, because the family narrative was that therapists were for people like me, people who couldn't handle things, people who were sensitive. If I went to therapy, I was admitting they were right. So I didn't go. For a decade after college, I didn't go. I white-knuckled it. Then my marriage started to fray. Not because of anything dramatic. Because I was exhausted. My husband, his name is Tomas, and he is a kind, watchful man. Tomas sat me down at our kitchen table one night and said, very quietly, Maren, I love you, but you are at war with yourself and I cannot keep being the country it happens in. Beat. So I went. Dr. Oren was nothing like I expected. She was in her 60s. White hair, soft voice, a small office that smelled like green tea. She didn't take notes. She watched the first 6 months we talked about Tomas, about work, about surface things. She nodded. She asked clean questions. I thought she wasn't very good. I thought I'd picked the wrong therapist. Then, on the 7th month, in the middle of me telling her some long story about how my mother had subtly insulted my cooking at Easter, Dr. Oren leaned forward. And she said something that, pause, I'm going to tell you exactly what she said, because it was the sentence that started everything. She said, Maren, what if your family is wrong about you? Silence. I want you to understand. I was 32 years old, and no one had ever asked me that question. Not a friend, not a teacher, not a girlfriend, not my husband, not myself. Not once, in 3 decades. The frame had always been the problem is Maren. How do we manage Maren? How do we love Maren despite Maren? Not once had anyone said, what if the frame is wrong? What if the problem isn't Maren? What if Maren is fine and the story about Maren is the problem? Beat, I started crying in that office. Not because I was sad. I want to be clear about this. I started crying because something in my chest moved. Like a piece of furniture that had been in front of a door for 30 years. And behind it there was light. There was a whole room. There was a whole me I had never met. I went home that night. Tomas was reading on the couch. I sat down next to him. I didn't say anything for a long time. And then I said, I think I might not be a difficult person. And he looked at me, and he didn't laugh, and he didn't say, of course you're not. He just put his book down very gently, and he said, Maren, I have been waiting for you to say that for 9 years. Long pause, that was the beginning. What followed was about a year of slow excavation. Dr. Oren didn't rush me. We pulled up memories one at a time. The rug, the school plays my mother didn't attend but said she had. The way my father went quiet whenever I asked about my mother's college years. The cousin's birthday, the way my brother Brennan, even now in his late 30s, would change the subject if I tried to talk about any of it. And the cassette tape. We talked about the cassette tape a lot. Beat. Dr. Oren said something to me one afternoon I have never forgotten. She said, the objects a family will not throw away are often the things the family cannot face. Your mother is holding on to something. The question is whether you are ready to know what. I wasn't ready, not yet, but the question started living in me, quietly, patiently, like a house guest who'd moved in and was waiting for me to make tea. And then my grandmother died, my mother's mother. Her name was Pearl. She was 91. It was peaceful as those things ever are. And after the funeral, the family had to clean out her house. A small brick house outside Briar Hollow, where my mother had grown up. The house I had visited every other Sunday as a child, beat until I was about 8. And the visits suddenly stopped. I had never asked why the visits stopped. I had never thought about it. It was just one of those things in a childhood that you don't question until you do. The visits stopped in October of 1994, the same October as the grape juice on the rug. I want you to hold that detail. It's going to matter very much in a minute. I went to help clean out Grandma Pearl's house. My mother didn't want to be there. She said it was too painful, which was true, and also convenient. So it was me and my Aunt Etta, my mother's younger sister. Etta is the person in my family who has always existed at the edges, always at the holiday but quiet at the holiday, always at the wedding but in a back row. The aunt, who I was 14, leaned over to me at a Thanksgiving table and said, very softly, you remember more than they think. I had laughed. I had thought she meant I had a good memory. I had not understood. Etta and I cleaned that house for 3 days, sorting, boxing, throwing away. On the 3rd day, in the back of a closet, behind a stack of Pearl's old church bulletins, Etta found a shoebox. Cardboard, soft with age. She held it for a long moment before she handed it to me. She said, and I'll never forget her face when she said this. She said, Maren, I think this is yours. Long pause, I opened it on Grandma Pearl's kitchen floor. Inside were 3 things. A child's drawing of a house, my drawing. I recognized the handwriting, with a stick figure of my mother and a stick figure, a man who was not my father. They were holding hands. The man had brown hair. My father has always been blonde. The second thing was a Polaroid, faded, of my mother, much younger, maybe 30, standing on a porch I didn't recognize, smiling with that same brown-haired man. His arm was around her waist. They were not dressed for a costume party. And the 3rd thing, The third thing was a blue cassette tape in my mother's handwriting. The label said only the letter M silence. Etta watched me. She didn't say a word. She let me sit with it. After about 10 minutes, I'm not exaggerating, it was a long 10 minutes, she finally said, very gently, your grandmother kept these. She wanted them kept. I think she wanted you to find them, Marin. Eventually, I asked her what's on the tape. She said, I don't know. I never listened. I wasn't sure I had the right beat. I took the box home. Tomas was at work. The house was quiet. I sat on the floor of our living room with the shoebox in front of me. I looked at the drawing. I looked at the Polaroid. And I want to describe this carefully. I had no feelings. I was waiting. I was a held breath. I went and got my old cassette player out of the basement, the one my father had bought me for my 11th birthday, and I had kept for sentimental reasons, even though I hadn't used it in 20 years. I put new batteries in it. I put the tape in. I sat with my finger on the play button for, I don't know, 5 minutes, maybe 10. I was afraid in a way I had never been afraid. Not the fear of something happening, the fear of something being true. Long pause, I pressed play. A child's voice came out of the speaker. A little girl, maybe 7, maybe 8 years old. She was crying. Not theatrical crying. Real crying. The kind small children do when they are scared and trying to whisper. The voice was mine. I was talking to my grandmother. I could hear Pearl in the background, gentle, asking me questions. And I was telling her, 8-year-old me was telling her what I had seen through the front window of our house that afternoon in October 1994. I was telling her about the man with the brown hair. I was telling her how he had kissed my mother on our front porch. I was telling her how, when my mother had come back inside, she had told me I had not seen what I had seen. I was telling Grandma Pearl that I was scared, because my mother had said if I ever told anyone, she would tell everyone I was a liar. And then I was telling Grandma Pearl, and this is the part that broke something open in me. I was telling her, Grandma, I spilled grape juice on the rug today. Mommy said it was because I was bad, but it was because she scared me. I didn't mean to spill it. Voice cracks, long pause. My grandmother's voice on the tape said very softly, I know, baby. I know. I believe you. I want you to know somebody believes you. Okay? Silence. I sat on my living room floor and I listened to that tape all the way through. It was 11 minutes long. My grandmother had recorded it the night I had told her, in October of 1994, on a visit to her house. She had recorded it because she had known that my mother was going to spend the rest of her life telling everyone I was the problem. And Pearl had wanted there to be one true thing in the world. One. Beat a small blue tape in a kitchen drawer, except my mother had found it, somehow, at some point, and my mother had taken it. And my mother had told me, for 30 years, that it was broken. It was not broken. Long pause. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment, because I think this is the part where the story turns, and I want you to feel it with me. I expected to feel rage. I expected to want to drive to my mother's house and throw the tape on her kitchen counter. I expected to want to scream, to call her, to make her hear my own voice as a child saying the things she had spent 3 decades denying. I did not feel that. What I was strange. It was almost a stillness, like the moment after a long fever breaks, like every cell in my body had been working hard for 30 known about, and now the work was done, and I was just empty, clean, quiet, beat. And then, sitting on that floor, I had a thought, a very simple thought. It came in like a sentence someone else was speaking. The thought was, they were never going to know me. They were never going to know me, because the version of me that lived in their heads wasn't actually me. It was a character they had written, and the character had a script. And as long as I kept reading the script, they would never have to meet the real person. Long pause, and I want to be careful here, because this is the moment that changed my life. And then I thought, I don't have to read the script anymore. I didn't have to confront her. I didn't have to expose her. I didn't have to play the tape for the family. I didn't have to do any of the things a movie would tell you to do. I just had to stop performing. I just had to walk off the stage, quietly, in the middle of the show, and let the play continue without me, and see what happened to a play whose main character has just left. Because here is the thing I understood, sitting on that floor, that I had not understood in 35 years on this earth. My family's narrative did not survive without my participation. They needed me to be difficult. They needed me to overreact. They needed me to be too much. Without that, the whole architecture of the family fell apart. Because if I wasn't the problem, then what was the problem? The cassette tape was. I made a decision that night, not a confrontation, a withdrawal. I decided I was going to stop apologizing for things that did not require apology. I was going to stop over-explaining myself. I was going to stop softening every sentence with, I'm sorry, but, and maybe this is just me, but, and I might be wrong, but. I was going to stop laughing nervously when my mother said something cutting at dinner. I was going to stop being the first one to fix the silence after she said something cruel. I was going to stop performing difficult, and I was also going to stop performing trying to make up for being difficult. I was just going to be a person. In their presence. Without permission. I didn't write a long text to my mother. I didn't post anything. I didn't even tell Brennan. I told Tomas because Tomas needed to know. And I told Dr. Oren because Dr. Oren had asked the question that had started all of this. And then I went quiet. And I waited for the next Tuesday morning phone call. This is where the story gets beat. This is where the story gets strange. Because what I did was so small. So not performing. That's all. Just not playing my part. And what came back at me from a family I had thought of as normal for 35 years, what came back at me was a thing I am still trying to understand. The first Tuesday call. 6 a.m. I was holding my coffee cup. My hands were steady. The phone rang 3 times 4. I let it ring out. I let it go to voicemail. Beat I didn't pick up. I'd never not picked up. In 15 years of Tuesday morning calls. Not once. She called back 20 minutes later. I let it ring out again. Then she called Tomas. I watched his phone light up on the counter. He looked at me. I shook my head. He let it go. She didn't leave a voicemail. Not yet. That came later. 3 days later, she sent a text. Polite. Smooth. Hi, sweetheart. I missed you on Tuesday. Just checking in. Hope everything is okay. I read it twice. The hope everything is okay was the move. That was the line that, in the old script, would have made me write back a long apology, explain my week, tell her I'd been overwhelmed, soften her, reassure her, make sure she knew nothing was wrong, that I wasn't being difficult. Beat, I wrote back. Everything's fine, talk soon. 4 words. No softener, no emoji, no explanation, no apology. It took me 20 minutes to send those 4 words. My finger hovered. My old self was screaming at me to add more, add something, add a smile, add an excuse. She'll think you're angry. She'll tell everyone you're being weird again. Add some par. I added nothing. I pressed send, and then I sat in my kitchen and I breathed. I want to tell you what happened next. Because what happened next was small in scale and enormous in meaning. And I think if you have ever been the difficult one in your family, and based on the comments I've already imagined you writing under this video, I think a lot of you have. I think you'll recognize what happens. The family started to escalate, not dramatically, not all at once, just up, like the volume knob being turned half a notch every few days. Beat, my mother called my brother. Brennan called me. Hey, Mom's worried about you. Is everything okay? You haven't been calling. You know how she gets. My brother, 2 years older than me, who had spent his entire life being the easy son, was now being deployed, the middle child of nothing, sent to retrieve his sister. You know how she gets. I said, everything's fine, Brennan. I'm just busy. He said, okay, well, just give her a call this week, okay? She's getting upset. I said, I'll call when I have time. He didn't. There was a pause on the line. I could hear him recalibrating. In the old script, I would have apologized to him for making him deal with this. I would have promised to call her that very night. I would have fixed it. Instead, I said, I'll call when I have time, and I let the silence sit on his end, and after a moment, he said, okay, Maren, okay. And we hung up. Pause. Night, Brennan called my mother and reported back. I know this because 2 days later, my mother called Tomas. She had never, in all the years we had been together, called my husband independently. Never. But she called him. And she said, Tomas told me this with a strange look on his face. She said, Thomas, is Maren going through something? She seems different. I just want to make sure she's okay. The she seems different was the giveaway. Because what different meant was, she's not playing her part. The story about Maren isn't matching up with what Maren is doing. I need a status update. I need to know what the new story is going to be. Tomas, God love him, said, Glenda, you should ask Maren that question directly. There was a long pause on the line, he told me. And then she said, pretty smoothly, of course, I worry. And she hung up. Long pause, it went on like this for weeks. The check-ins from Brennan, the little texts from my mother. Just thinking of you. Saw something that made me think of you. Hope you're sleeping. The texts were beautifully calibrated. Each one was the smallest possible hook. Each one was designed to make me feel guilty enough to respond with a long, warm message that put me back in my role, the daughter, who reassures the mother, Frodo. The role of the daughter who manages the mother's emotions about the daughter. I answered each text the same way. Briefly, warmly, without apologizing. Sleeping fine, thanks. Hope you're well too. 5 words, 8 words, never the long, warm reply she was fishing for. Pause. And here's what I noticed. And this is the part I want every person watching this to hear. Because this is the part nobody told me, the silence after my short replies got louder and louder. Because the family system didn't know what to do with a Maren who wasn't generating enough material for the family to talk about. There was nothing to call Brennan about, nothing to whisper to my father about. Nothing to bring up at the next dinner. My short, polite text gave the family nothing. And the family did not know how to exist on nothing. So they started inventing material. Beat, I heard through a cousin that my mother had told her sister Etta that Moran had been going through a really hard time lately. And we're all worried. I heard through Brennan that my mother had told my father I had been acting cold. I heard through a friend whose mother is friends with my mother that I was apparently under a lot of stress at work and they're hoping I get help. Pause, none of it was true. I was in fact the calmest I had been in my entire adult life. I was sleeping 8 hours, I was working out. I was reading novels at night. Tomas and I were happier than we had been in years. The marriage that had been fraying was knitting back together because I was no longer at war with myself. The war had ended. I had stopped fighting. And the only people in the world who needed me to still be fighting were my family. So they had started fighting on my behalf. They had started writing the difficult Marin story themselves, behind my back because I had stopped writing it for them. Long pause, that was when I understood. That was when I really deeply, all the way down understood. The story about me had never been about me. Silence, it had always been about them. It had always been a story the family needed to tell itself, so that the family could explain why certain things felt wrong in our home. Certain octobers, certain silences, certain rugs. The story Marin is the difficult one was the family's emotional load-bearing wall. And I had been the wall. I had held up the whole structure. By being the explanation for everything that was off in our home, I had let everyone else not have to look at it. Beat, the moment I stepped out from under the weight. The moment I stopped being the explanation, the whole house began to tilt, and they were running around inside it, trying to find new walls, trying to make me into the wall again. She's stressed, she's cold, she's going through something, we're worried. What they were really saying was, please come back inside the story, please, we don't know who we are without you in it. Long pause. The dinner happened in May, a family dinner, my mother's house. A Sunday, roast chicken, the good china. She had invited us. Me, Tomas, Brennan, and his wife for what she called just a family evening, nothing special. In our family, nothing special always meant I have a plan. Beat, Tomas didn't want me to go. He said, Marin, I will go with you anywhere you want, but I'm telling you, you don't owe her this dinner. I told him I wanted to go, not to confront her, not to play the tape, just to be in the room, as myself, to see if I could. I want to describe this dinner carefully, because what happened at this dinner is the thing I will remember about the whole year. And what happened at this dinner was almost nothing. And that almost nothing was the most powerful thing that has ever passed between my mother and me. We sat down. My mother said grace. She always says grace. She says it with the small reverent pause at the end that lets you know she has been thinking about how to say grace before she said it. We passed the chicken. My father said something about the weather. Brennan asked about Tomas's work. Brennan's wife laughed at the right moments. The dinner conversation moved along its usual track, and my mother started telling stories. Beat. The stories were about me. This is a thing she does. I had not noticed for 30 years that she's this, but I noticed it that night because I had been paying attention. At every family dinner, at some point in the meal, my mother begins to tell stories about me. Specifically, stories about me being too much. Always with a soft, fond laugh. Always with the warmth of a woman remembering something charming. Remember when Maureen did this? Remember when Maureen said that? And the family always laughs. And the family always agrees. And I always sit there and laugh along and play the role of the woman who is good-natured about her own difficultness. That night, she did the rug story. She told it to Brennan's wife. I'd heard it before but laughed politely. Oh. This was when Marin was about 8, and she threw a glass of grape juice at our white rug. Pause. And here is what I did. I did not interrupt. I did not correct her. I did not say that's not what happened. I did not say I have a cassette tape in my house, Mother, that says exactly what happened. I did not say any of that. Beat, I just stopped laughing. That was it. That was the whole thing. In the old script, I would have laughed gently along with her telling. I would have shaken my head in fond self-deprecation. I would have said something like, yeah, I was a piece of work, wasn't I? I would have collaborated with the story. I would have stamped it as approved. I just sat quietly, with my hands folded in my lap. And I looked at my mother while she told the story. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at. She felt it. Long pause. She felt it about 3 sentences in. I watched her face change. She kept telling the story, but her eyes flicked to me, and back to Brennan's wife, and back to me. Her voice didn't quite know where to land. She finished the story, and she made the little laugh she always makes at the end, the ode, at me one more time, and I just held her gaze. I didn't laugh. I didn't help. The laugh died in the air, the table got quiet, not awkward quiet, wrong quiet, like a song that stopped halfway through. Brennan's wife shifted in her seat. Brennan looked at his plate. My father, my poor quiet father Doyle. My father said very softly, pass the potatoes, please. Beat, and then my mother did something I had never seen her do. She looked away first. In 35 years, my mother had never looked away first from me. Never. She always held the gaze. She always made me drop my eyes. And on that Sunday, in her dining room, with the good china and the roast chicken, my mother looked at me and I looked at her without performing, and she looked away. That was the moment. Silence, that was the moment everything changed. Because she knew in that instant that I knew. She didn't know what I knew or how I knew. She just knew that I had stopped agreeing. And without my agreement, the story had nothing to stand on. The rest of the dinner was a slow, strange thing. She tried to start 2 more stories about me, smaller ones, less weight, and each time, I just didn't help. I didn't interrupt, I didn't argue, I just didn't participate. And without my participation, the stories deflated mid-air, like balloons with a slow leak. They never got to their punchlines. The family didn't laugh. Brennan looked confused. My father stopped making eye contact with anyone. We ate the chicken. We had dessert. I helped clear the table. I hugged my father in the kitchen. I thanked my mother for dinner. I did not perform warmth I did not feel, but I did not perform coldness either. I was just there, as myself, for maybe the first time in her presence in my entire life. Beat, Tomas and I left at 8:30. We got in the car. I closed the passenger door, and from the window of my parents' house, I saw something I will never forget. My mother sat down at the dining room table by herself, alone. The table not yet fully cleared, and she stared at the empty chair where I had been sitting. She didn't move. She just stared at the chair. Long pause. We pulled out of the... As we drove down their street, I looked back, and I saw the front window of the house. My mother still sitting at that table, still looking at the empty chair, still not moving. Then we passed her car in the driveway, and I saw, faintly through the side window of her own sedan, that she had, at some point earlier in the evening, sat in that car. And the imprint of where she had sat was still in the driver's seat. 11 minutes, my father told me later without intending to tell me. He said, your mother sat out there before you arrived. For 11 minutes, she didn't start the car, she just sat. For 1 second only, I felt sorry for her. Beat, not forgiveness, not absolution. Just the recognition that she was a human being, sitting alone in a car. Afraid of her own daughter, because her own daughter had finally stopped agreeing to be invented. She was small. For the first time in my life, my mother looked small. Aunt Etta called me a week later. She said, Marin, can I come over? She came on a Saturday afternoon. I made tea. We sat in my living room. She held the cup with both hands. She looked at me for a long moment before she spoke. And then she said the thing she had been holding for 27 years. She said, I knew, Marin, about your mother, about the man, about 1994. I knew. I didn't have proof. I had a feeling. And my mother, your grandmother, Pearl told me, near the end on her oxygen. She told me about the tape. She said she had given it to you in a way that you would find it when you were ready. She made me promise I would not push you. She said you would find it when the time was right. Beat, I asked her, why didn't anyone say anything? Why did you all let her tell that story about me for 30 years? Etta closed her eyes. She held the teacup. And then she said something I think about almost every day. She said, Marin, we were cowards. I was a coward. Your father's a coward was a coward. And didn't know. Your grandmother tried, but the rest of us, we were cowards. Your mother is the kind of person who, if you challenge her, will burn the whole house down. So we let her burn you instead. We told ourselves it wasn't that bad. We told ourselves you were resilient. We told ourselves you would be fine. We were wrong. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Voice. Crack. Long pause. We sat in silent silence for a long time. I didn't cry. I had been done crying. I just held my tea. And then I said, Etta, you told me once at a Thanksgiving when I was 14 that I remembered more than they thought. She smiled. Just barely. I did. Why did you say that to me? She said. Because I wanted you to know. Even if I couldn't say it out loud, I wanted you to know that one person in that house knew that you were not crazy. I'm sorry it took me 27 years to say more than that, but I wanted you to have that one sentence to hold on to, in case the rest of the world told you that you didn't see what you saw. I had been holding that sentence for 27 years. I had not known I was holding it, but I had been. And it had been a small light in a long room. You remember more than they think. I leaned forward and I hugged my aunt. We stayed like that for a long time. It has been about 10 months now since that Sunday dinner. I want to tell you what my life looks like now, not because the ending is clean. It isn't. Not because I have won. I haven't, in any conventional sense. There is no public confrontation. There is no big reveal. There is no movie scene where I play the tape in front of the whole family at Thanksgiving. There never will be. That isn't who I am, and that isn't what this story is. What I have, instead, is something quieter. And I am going to say this carefully, and better. Beat, I have stopped performing. That's the whole thing. That's the whole revenge. I have stopped performing the character my family wrote for me. And without my performance, the character does not exist. The script sits in a drawer. The play does not run. Every time my mother tries to tell a story about the difficult Marin, the story falls flat in the air because the difficult Marin is not in the room. There is just a woman in her 30s named Marin, drinking coffee, listening politely, not helping the story land. Long pause. My mother left me 17 voicemails over the course of 3 months. I counted. They escalated. The first ones were soft, just checking in. The middle ones were guilt-shaped. I just don't understand what I did. The later ones started to crack. You are being cruel to your mother, Marin, after everything I have done for you. The last one, I want to tell you about the last one because the last one was the only one in which I think she came close to telling the truth. The last voicemail said, Marin, I don't know who you are right now. I don't know this person. I want my daughter back. And I sat in my kitchen and I listened to that voicemail and I thought, very calmly, I am not your daughter anymore. I never was. The daughter you are missing was a character I played for 35 years. I'm sorry you miss her. But she was never real. Beat, I did not call her back. I have not called her back. I will call her someday, when I want to, not because she has summoned me, not because the family has organized a campaign, when I want to, on my schedule, as myself. That is the difference. That is the only difference. And it is the whole difference. I have not played the cassette tape for anyone except Tomas and Dr. Oren. I will not be playing it for the family. Not because I am protecting my mother. I want to be very clear about that. I am not protecting her. I am protecting me. Because the moment I play that tape for the family, I become the daughter who exposed her mother. And that becomes a new role, a new script. Marin, the destroyer of families. And I am not interested in trading one cage for another. The cassette tape sits in a small fireproof box in my closet, next to a passport and the deed to my house and a photograph of my grandmother. It is mine. It is the evidence I never needed for anyone but myself. Because the moment I heard my 8-year-old voice crying to my grandmother that she had to believe me, the moment my grandmother's voice said, I believe you, baby, I had every piece of validation I will ever need for the rest of my life. From the one person in my family who told the truth. That tape is not a weapon. That tape is a receipt. I want to tell you what I have learned, because I think this is the part of the story that might mean something to you. I used to think that the worst thing a family could do was lie about you. Now I know the worst thing a family can do is remember you a certain way on purpose. Because a lie can be corrected. A lie is something someone says and you can say something else, and the lie can be replaced. But a constructed memory, a narrative, is something different. A narrative gets repeated. A narrative gets reinforced. A narrative becomes the language the family speaks. A narrative becomes the air the family breathes. And after a while, the narrative isn't a thing anyone is telling. The narrative is just what is. That's just Marin. You know how she is. Remember when she was it. You cannot fight a narrative by arguing with it. Arguing with it just feeds it. Every time you defend yourself against the role, you are confirming you are in the role. You are saying, I am the difficult one. Please believe me that I'm not. And the family says, of course, you'd say that. You're the difficult one. The loop is closed. There is no winning by argument. Beat. The only way out is to stop playing. To walk off the stage. To take your costume off and hang it up and leave the theater. And let the family run the play with an empty stage. They will, for a while. They will keep performing around the empty chair where you used to sit. They will keep telling stories about you in your absence. But eventually, and I promise you this, because I have lived it, eventually the story starves. Eventually they cannot maintain a narrative that has no central character. Eventually they have to look at each other. And that is when the family has to face the thing the narrative was covering. Long pause. In my case, the thing the narrative was covering was a Tuesday morning in October of 1994, when my mother kissed a man on our porch, and her 8-year-old daughter saw it through a window, and the daughter had to be rewritten as a problem for the rest of her life, so that the kiss could be a thing that never happened. I was the cover story. I was the alibi. I was the because Marin is difficult that allowed the family to never ask why was Marin crying, or why did the Sunday visits stop in October 1994, or why doesn't Glenda let anyone touch that blue cassette tape? I was the answer that meant they never had to ask the question. And the moment I stopped being the answer, the question rose. And it is still rising in my mother's house, quietly, like water under the floor. This is the part where I have to tell you the universal thing. Because I owe it to you. You watched this whole story. You came this far. You deserve the line. I used to think I had to make my family understand me before I could become myself. Now I know that is backwards. You yourself first. You become yourself without their permission. You become yourself in the rooms they are not in. You become yourself in your therapist's office and in your husband's eyes. And in the quiet morning kitchen, where you drink coffee with steady hands. Once you are fully yourself, you walk back into their house and they will see what they can bear to see. Some will see you, some will not. That is not your job to manage. Pause. Your job is to be the person you actually are, not the person they remember you as. They didn't remember me wrong. Long pause, they remembered me the way they needed me to be. And the moment I stopped needing them to remember me right, the moment I stopped asking, was the moment I became free. Silence, I want to come back to that kitchen. The one I described at the beginning. 6 a.m., the coffee cup, the steady hands. It is now 10 months after the first morning I let the call go to voicemail. It is a Tuesday. The light outside is gray and soft. I am wearing one of Tomas's old sweaters. The coffee cup is the same one. I have had it since college. It has a small chip on the rim. The phone rings. I don't reach for it. I let it ring. 3 times. 4. It rings out. The kitchen is quiet again. I take a sip of coffee. My hand is perfectly steady. I do not feel guilty. I do not feel proud. I do not feel triumphant or vengeful or sad. I just feel like myself. A woman in her kitchen, drinking coffee, watching the light come in. That is the whole revenge. That is the entire revenge. Becoming a person who can drink her coffee in peace on a Tuesday morning. Becoming a person whose hands do not shake. Becoming a person whose mother's call does not have the power to rewrite her day. Becoming a person whose family does not get to decide who she is anymore. I am 35 years old. I am finally the author of the story about me. Long pause. And to the person watching this, yes, you. The one who has been sitting very still during this whole video. The one who recognized something. The one who is maybe thinking about a Tuesday morning of your own, or a story your family tells about you that doesn't quite feel right, or a memory you've been told didn't happen the way you remember it happening. Pause, I want you to know. You remember more than they think. You always have. The story they told about you is not the story of who you are. It is the story of who they needed you to be. And you do not have to keep being her. Or him. Or whoever the character was. You can put the script down. You can walk off the stage. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to fight about it. You just have to stop reading the lines. That's all. That's the whole thing. So, tell me. In the comments, I want to know. Pause, what role did your family cast you in? The screw-up, the peacemaker, the responsible one, the difficult one, the dreamer, the disappointment, the golden child, the burden. Which one was it? And this is the harder question, the one I'm not sure I would have been able to answer 2 years ago. Are you still playing it? Long pause, I'll be in the comments. I read them, all of them. I want to hear your version. I want to know what your 8-year-old self knew that your family has been telling you didn't happen. I want to know what your cassette tape is and what drawer it's in, and whether you've listened to it yet. Beat because someone believes you.
Pause.
I believe you.